Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come out here virtually to come to Kirkwood Public Library and do a presentation. I know we've been trying to do this. I think we originally scheduled back for March. We pushed it back a little bit and pushed it back a little further, and now we are here in the virtual version. So, Michael, feel free to cut in anytime you wish. And for those who actually watch it recorded, at the end, I'll have my email. You definitely feel free to contact me. As Executive Director at Gateway Greening, I've been with the organization now for 5 years. It's been an interesting journey in terms of what I think people are realizing in St. Louis around food, and actually our attitudes are changing toward it. And then I'll kind of touch on too how some of those attitudes have even, I think, moved even faster as we are now under COVID and all the strange cascading effects that it has caused. So I only have really essentially 9 slides here. So please feel free to jump in with questions that you have. I'm going to touch on 4 things. I'll give you a brief history of Gateway Greening. I'll kind of discuss our current programs. And then you'll notice throughout the presentation, I take some bold, black, all caps letters and put some things on my presentation to kind of indicate what COVID has changed for us, how we've reacted, both in the negative and in, I think, some positive ways too, going forward, how it might actually change my attitudes like I mentioned. So I'll mark those throughout and you'll get a feel for how we've adjusted. And then really looking at next year. For Gateway Greening now, we are winding down our 2020 growing season. It's been a very strange one, but it's been interesting for us as we kind of sit back now and actually have a board meeting on Wednesday, the fact that a lot of changes we've had under the works and in planning for a long time, in some cases for the past 5 years, are coming to fruition now over the next few months for Gateway Greening. So we're looking ahead to next year and hopefully some big changes coming to our organization. And then I'll touch on the end, just getting involved. I'll give you a quick overview how we're kind of like funded and functioning, and then ways you can get involved in various ways. And I'll just read our vision, because I think it's kind of where we are right now in terms of our efforts going forward, connecting people to the land, to their food, and to each other in deeply rooted, resilient urban communities. This is our history. We have changed names a few times, and we've now been around for 36 years. I've only been there for 5 of it, so if you want to ask me questions about the previous history, I'm going to be very limited on what I know. But we actually started off as a volunteer organization in '84, and I'll say too, it was primarily focused around flowers and flower beds. We had a very strong connection in our beginnings to garden groups, and that's what kind of led to our start in terms of trying to help communities do more flower gardens in their neighborhoods. And you'll see evolving over the years that definitely changed. Where now we have 200 projects in our network. I'd say almost 99% of them are all food-based. We've seen that clear shift over the years. And for a while they were called Gateway to Gardening Association, and then we morphed into Gateway Greening, which is the name we've kept. We have adjusted our kind of branding over the years, and you can even see in 2017 we had that green G, but even the name really didn't kind of really connect with what we were doing. So we actually added the tagline, "The Power of Growing Food." And that's been a big thing right now for us. And I think as we adjust right now, looking for 2021, as we complete a strategic plan right now, food is going to be the focus going forward. Definitely we promote pollinators in our gardens too, but in terms of non-native flowers, we don't have specialty in doing that at all right now. We've really focused on the food and the benefits of other plants around it that do promote more growing of food. And then at the top, you'll see Chefs in a Garden. For 22 years, we got together a group of 200 plus people and had a party, and we brought chefs in from various restaurants, 10 to 12, 15 of them, and they would take some of our produce, we make a challenge out of it to have them create their own delicacy and be rated by all the attendees. For the past 2 years, in the photo right there, I've actually been holding it at the Science Center and the Grow exhibit outside. It's been wonderful. This year we didn't do it. So you'll see under the 2020 with the chefs and the new, we actually took our gala and broke it up into 4 nights. And it's actually 4 Wednesday nights in October. So our last one's coming up on this Wednesday. We're going out to the restaurants. We decided to take our ticket price and split it with the restaurants. So for the first 3 nights, we were actually at physical restaurants. We were at Squires, 1111, and then Grace Meat and 3, just where we split the price tag with them to make sure they get some money during this time of COVID, but we also make some money too, to benefit ourselves too, because for 22 years, we did have chefs coming to our event, giving their time, their money, and their effort, and their staff time too, to support us, that we felt this year we had to give a little bit back. And I'll say the response has been great. First weekend, we sold really well. The first Wednesday, we sold really well. The second and third, we sold out. And then Wednesday night, we're actually going to be in a community garden with some food trucks coming in. We're a little worried about the weather. It might be a little cool, but we're going to kind of change it up a little bit and have people come out to a community garden. We're actually going to go to the Florissant Community Garden, have the event there on Wednesday night. So, and if you email me tonight, I may be able to get you tickets still. So let me know. But this kind of gives you an overview where we've kind of morphed over the years and how we're going to be, I would say too, going to be changing coming in the near future too. And please jump in any questions. If you feel it's better to put it in the chat, you can add to the chat too. So for 36 years, we have been promoting community projects, and that means community gardens. It can be a school garden as our primary two project types. And with the map here, you'll see we are heavily focused in the city of St. Louis and in St. Louis County. So with the green dots, you'll see community gardens. The yellow dots are school gardens. Of our 200 projects, about 80 of them are school gardens. And then you also see on the map then too, the red dots, we actually have a land trust, a separate structure under Gateway Greening where we actually own the land under the community garden or school garden. The reason being for that is the fact in the city of St. Louis, we have a number of gardens that were on city land. Some of them have been there 15 years. And the way the city works, if a developer comes along and wishes to buy city land, they can have the land vacated in 30 days. So some of these gardens have put a lot of effort, blood, sweat, equity into their gardens over the years, and some have built structures, some have paid for water lines. We felt we needed to actually have a structure in place to help them preserve their investment for the future. So what we've done is with our land trust is we will own the land, but we'll do nothing with it. As long as you, as that community group keeps it green space, we'll leave you alone. They'll pay their insurance and we're good. So for our land trust, we quickly added in like 15 projects right away. We have a few more on the docket right now, but it's a way to preserve those projects for the future. And we work with local politicians to make sure they understand that this land will be locked up as a green space for the future too. Because there are certain gardens we have that are on city land. It is too prime of a spot necessarily for the future to be held in a trust forever. So we do negotiate with the city to discuss which ones we want to bring in the land trust and why. And so far it's gone very well. We've had a good relationship with the city in doing this. We have not done one in like St. Louis County yet, but we are exploring that one right now with one possible potential one in North County. So we do look to expand that. And then with COVID, we had delay. We've been in the process of expanding to Illinois for quite a while, but we need to get approval from the state of Illinois to become a nonprofit over there to actually provide our services. And we got approved a week before COVID hit. So we are still planning to expand. We actually should add a few more dots to the east side. We do have a few more over there now, just with word of mouth and what we're doing. But we do hope to have a much more of a full expansion into Madison County and St. Clair County in Illinois in the near future. I'll kind of go through our projects we're working on right now, and then how it's been adjusted for the world we live in now with COVID. But for our primary thing is community project, which kind of the map shows you previously, is the fact that places, whether the community garden, school garden, you also add in the urban orchards and urban farms too, depending on how big they are and what their primary focus is. So for our approach is that the fact that we follow an asset-based community development approach in terms of those 200 projects, we do not plant, we do not weed, and we do not harvest any of that produce. These are all community projects that came to us wanting to do something. And what we've done over the years is figured out what will be the best rate of success on a project. Because honestly, it's very easy to build a community garden. Third year, fourth year, that's the hard part, especially if a garden leader moves away or changes jobs. It can be difficult to contain and continue a community or any kind of community project without that nucleus of a strong group. So for a lot of our projects, we ask that you need 10 people that are interested at the beginning to go through this process. And we'll walk through them with them, what their mission is, what the resources are that they have already, what resources they need to really build their project up. And depending on what their needs are and their resources, We provide scholarships to certain communities that need more help, but we can provide the wood and the tools to build the beds. We can provide the actual soil coming into the site. We can provide hand tools, wheelbarrows, compost bins, lots of things to get the garden started. And sometimes we'll tell them too, for the first time around, let's just do a few things, not try to build the garden out all at once, and just make sure that the nucleus is there for a future project to grow. Because our gardens can come back once a year. If they get built this year, they can come back next year for an expansion. And we do have a lot of expansions. Like this year we had, I think, around 30 expansions on projects where the garden was already going, but they wanted to add more beds. They may have wanted to add maybe some fruit or nut trees. They may wanted a compost bin. So even within our network, you do get the initial startup investment from us in terms of your basic materials, but we do want to stay with you into the future to really help you grow and be successful long, long into the future. And part of our approach is we love getting out in the community. We love seeing the community come together. We love having volunteers come to the community. We love getting the staff out for a startup of a brand new garden for the day of building. It has not happened under COVID. It has been all deliveries. So for a lot of us, it's been tough to watch that. Here we are going over, dropping off the wood, dropping off the soil, and kind of explaining to the garden leader, this is what you got, this is what you can do, good luck. And it's been a struggle because a lot of our volunteers are older. We're trying to be very cognizant of what they need and what they want. So we've been very cautious in terms of how we mix our communities and even bring other things into communities in terms of other people too. So we've really limited that. We do offer, as part of our network too, plants, both for the spring, summer, and the fall growing seasons. And again, it's usually a nice event. People come, pick up their plants. We have a nice discussion. Maybe have a class going on. It's been all curbside this year. So I'll read your question then. So what ways have you seen community gardens, people growing, connecting to the land, aid local communities? In other words, what is the underlying motivation and benefit? Very good. Okay. Well, it's very varied, I guess. That's a bad way to say it. It is varied in terms of most people want to come to a community garden on an individual basis for food for themselves. We do have a number of community gardens. The vast majority of them are growing for their own selves and for their own family. What we've seen over the years, though, is actually it does create a connection point within a neighborhood in terms of there aren't many places anymore in our society where we have a neutral space, a third home, sometimes people say it, for people to go to and connect with their neighbors. And what we've seen with nature, and especially with growing food, it brings people together because it's a common topic. Nothing's ever easy. Nothing's ever gonna grow perfectly every year. There's always struggles. There's always sharing of information. And just that connection among the gardeners within a garden, discuss just how they grow, what works, what doesn't work, build some relationships that they would not have had otherwise without the community garden being there. And with that then too, one, it beautifies land, especially. Usually a lot of these lots were vacant, might have had some trash on them, maybe had some debris that we've cleaned up. So we've at least beautified them. You know, the community coming together. And then one major benefit is the fact that you bring people together, they're gonna have more eyes on the street there too. So we've actually seen in previous studies that crime goes down around community gardens because people are watching it, people are taking care of it, people have a pride in it too. So that's been an extra benefit as part of the community garden. And then what we've seen too over the years is the missions have changed of the community gardens. We now have a number of community gardens that purely grow food for food pantries. And I think that's one thing where people are realizing the value of doing more than just growing for themselves. And you see more, one, they're growing for food pantries, and then some gardens actually will have their private beds in the back, but then up front, they'll do community beds where everybody in the garden has to work on them, but all the food there is for the community or for a food pantry. So we are seeing much more of a communal approach, I guess you could say, helping other people with their harvest. Because a lot of things, as we look at individuals at their home too, whenever you grow in your garden, you're always going to grow more than you eat. And part of it is sharing with your garden bed neighbor, sharing with your family, sharing with your neighbors. And that also just adds the extra community we need right now, especially with COVID, and making more connections with people and just dropping off food at people's houses that might need it. So that's kind of where we've kind of seen the greater impacts beyond just the people growing the food for themselves. And we're seeing, like, one thing we do own in our land trust is a urban farm in South City. That's the International Farm. It was actually started by the International Institute at first, but we have 29 international farmers, where they're given not just garden beds, they have rows that they actually farm that not only help feed their family, but it's really feeding their community too. So there is much more of a broad interest in growing food, and we're going to see more and more of it, I think, going forward. And I'll also add too, I think with St. Louis, we don't realize we're very much of an ag city. And I think with our kind of leading into our school program too is the fact that we got to tell these kids here in St. Louis that there's opportunities in both agriculture in the dirt, but also in the lab too. And if we can harness some interest from some of the kids now at an early age with their schoolwork in terms of getting them outside and growing food, it can be impactful. And we actually have worked on trying to build up a high school program to get more kids outside, learning how food grows. And maybe then they can follow a track with food agriculture at the St. Louis Community College, maybe go to the Danforth Center and really get into that as their career field going forward. So there even could be a workforce development piece to all of this also going forward. And then I'll just touch on briefly with school program. We have 80 school gardens. We do a lot with 17 school districts. It has been quiet this year, unfortunately, because most of the gardens in March were not open. A few got open in time, but most of them did not open before everything closed down. And then this fall has been tough for our teachers that lead a lot of these gardens. They've been overwhelmed, and a lot of gardens are not going to open this fall either. So we've done a lot of virtual training, trying to find ways, because to a degree, there is a push to get kids outside for the schools that are in session right now. But then again, a lot of schools are still virtual. And even some of the ones that are coming back right now, there won't be a garden opportunity for them. But I will say we've had our first ever build. We actually built an outdoor blackboard for the first time, testing that out to see how that works. And we're offering schools now as part of our packages too, some kneeling pads that can also be used for sitting outside too, just to give them more opportunities, even just beyond the gardening piece of using a school garden, finding other ways for education. Because we've had math classes come outside and measure the garden, volume, length, distance, measure the height of plants and how fast they grow. And we're even bringing in some history too to some of these plants too as part of our sessions and things we do virtually to teach people where their food comes from, what country it came from, and what cultural things are around the food too. So we're trying to expand the garden and make it as accessible as possible, I guess you could say, for students and for teachers too, to feel comfortable coming out and using the school gardens. And then the big piece is community education too. We do numerous trainings, a lot more under normal times. We normally do them every Saturday at our demonstration garden. We do a virtual one about once a week now. We used to have classes at Urban Chestnut in the city, and we actually do a lot of classes with St. Louis County libraries. We do have a number of libraries that have actually a garden on their site. St. Louis County libraries went through the renovation. They actually had an opportunity to put some land aside. So we have one in North County, one in South County, and actually one in Grants View. And then we actually have a new one that was supposed to open this past spring, that opened hopefully next spring out in Fenton. So it's been interesting to see the support that the library can provide to a garden. And we've actually had some early discussions with St. Louis City libraries too about it. They have a lot less land to work with in terms of where the library locations are. If I remember correctly about Kirkwood, I don't know if you have much land around the building, but there could be a point somewhere nearby maybe where a garden could be connected to the library and provide that extra support network. Because these gardens have been very successful. They have wait lists to get into them. So they've gone very well. And then I mentioned a minute ago, our Gateway Green Land Trust too, and preserving those projects for the future. All right. I'll just keep rolling. If you have questions, please jump in.
I did have a question.
Sure, please.
So I know you mentioned in the benefit of, community gardens and, people being to get food and sharing food. Have you all or other of the gardens that are running noticed the need for food with everything going on and people being unemployed and going to food banks? Have you guys noticed the impact of that?
Yes, and the fact that we keep getting efforts to people want to partner with us and take our food and move it somewhere else, and we're like, we can't grow anymore. That's the challenge. We've worked with a lot with Operation Food Search, and the fact that their need has gone so high that it's easy to give away canned food. It's hard to give away fresh food, and that part of the challenge is the shelf life. So we've been trying to find other ways where do we actually grow some on a project basis to get more food out to these communities. Just because even before COVID, food pantries were great, but they were still getting a lot of canned food. They weren't getting the fresh food. And I think we've now, realized a lot more now with COVID then we need more access to fresh food. Just even with COVID too, if you have underlying issues, you're more susceptible. If you've been eating well, you probably have less of a chance of maybe some of the dire effects of it. So if we can find ways to get more fresh food to more people of all incomes, I think it'd be very beneficial going forward. But right now it's been a challenge of just the quantity. We don't have the infrastructure in place when you have people growing more or less in a 4x8 garden bed. They grow a lot, they can get a lot out of it, but we can't make a dent really in the overall need for fresh food right now yet. And part of it, we had an idea actually to build a farm with Epperson Food Search. We had some momentum, and some of the leadership at the site made a change, so we backed away from that, but the idea has not gone away, because even though for them, like Operation Food Search, they had a nice bump in terms of donations coming in early on in COVID, a lot of that funding has gone away because they were seeing it as kind of immediate, here's some cash infusion. But the problem is the need has not gone away. As we go into the fall, I think we're going to see more need too from a lot of communities, and we can't meet it. Unfortunately, we don't have the food out there right now to give to these food pantries the way we should be. Definitely one challenge we still have ahead of us. Yeah, thanks for the question. That's good. What I'm showing you, I've not shown anybody else yet. We're updating our planting calendar, and this is our most sought after piece, because this is basically a good roadmap for the things that grow well in St. Louis and when to do everything, whether it be if you're doing the seedling, when you're going to sow the seeds, if you need to transplant them, when they're going to grow, and when you need to harvest. And this is by far our most popular piece. And every year people are like, when's it going to come out? So this is our first showing of our new one coming out in the new year. And part of this is the fact that there's not much information on the Midwest in terms of growing in your backyard. The coasts have done very well with some community garden projects and getting information out, but it is very different growing here in St. Louis. And even we've got some close relationships in Kansas City. Even the weather in Kansas City is very different. They're in a different zone than we are here in St. Louis. So this piece of information has been very helpful to a number of people, and we keep adding to it too as we kind of expand and test things out and figure out what does grow well here in the region. And it's something we want to push forward more and get in the hands of more people. Because one of the challenges we have, and it's almost with anything that's new, is you got to try it once. I think people are scared to get into gardening to a degree and growing their own food because they're going to fail. They are going to fail. You're always going to fail. It's never going to be quite right exactly the way you want it to be, whether it be the way you planted it or the way the weather reacted that year in terms of rain, sun, and the temperature too. So it all varies into this, but we're hopeful that we can get bright tools to people to get people comfortable to go outside now again, start planting. And I do think, looking ahead, hopefully with 2021, we're going to see actually a renewed interest in trying to grow food in their backyard, front yard, in a community garden, or in a school garden going forward. And we're hopeful that we can provide the funding to really push that in 2021 too.
I had another question that came to mind.
Go for it.
So with the planting calendar and, what is best to plant when, and what kind, have you guys taken into consideration climate change and
yes,
and how that affects how things grow and what to do about it?
Just since I've been at Gateway Green in the past 5 years, I don't know if you can see my little cursor there, but the freeze dates have changed. The growing season is getting longer, which is allowing us to grow more things here too. This list has gotten longer because of climate change, good and bad, I guess. But and the freeze dates, the last frost in the spring and the first frost in the fall the season's gotten longer. So we're definitely seeing the changes there. And we're seeing more things we can grow here. Things that we wouldn't even consider growing here 10 years ago, we're now growing here in St. Louis because of weather change. And the winters are not as harsh as they used to be. So
that's interesting.
Yes,
I wouldn't think of that. That's,
Yeah. It's just like the armadillos. We see armadillos now here in St. Louis. Things are coming further from the south and coming up here. And it's changing what we can do. Yeah. For good and for bad, I guess. Because, yeah, in some ways, we can't grow more here now. Is that really the way it should be? Probably not. But for growing food in your backyard, it does help. And the big thing for us, and this got delayed with COVID, is the fact that we are looking to move. We currently have 3 sites right now. We have our offices on Washington Avenue, and then on Bell Avenue and Grand Center, but not connected. We have an operations facility, and then like 5 parcels away, we have a demonstration garden. it does not function well. So one of my challenges and one of my charges when I first came to Gateway Greening was for us to move to a new home. And what we're looking at, if you're familiar with it, is Delmar Divine Project. It's the old St. Luke's Hospital on Delmar in the West End. It's just east of the Loop. And they're working to create a cortex for nonprofits. They want to bring together various nonprofits of all backgrounds and sizes and types into one space, and to use the cortex model of having shared meeting space, shared kitchen space, shared locker facilities, shared amenities in one site, but this would be for nonprofits. And if you're familiar with Build-A-Bear, their founder, Maxine Clark, is the, she calls herself the inspirational leader for this project. Chief Inspirator, that's what it is, Chief Inspirator for the project. And with this project, she's looking to bring together at least 40 nonprofits into the site and also add in some residential. There'll be some retail on the first floor. It should be a major shift for this block in the West End neighborhood. And we're excited about it too, just for the mere fact it'll bring our office together with our demonstration garden at one site. Because I'll say one of the challenges we've always had, and it just pains me when I'm at the office, and a school bus pulls up and starts unloading, and we're like, no, you're at the wrong place. You need to go over here. And operationally, it's been a pain being separated. So for a number of reasons, we wanted to combine our resources into one site. And for us to be linked in to other nonprofits and have shared space, it is really exciting. So it's been a project it's 500,000 square feet. So it is a fairly large project. Clayco is the construction side of the company, the other project. They have now started construction. They say at the earliest, they're hoping they can get us in by August 1st of next year, but could be in the fall. But for us, it's a way for us to really kind of raise our visibility to a degree and really make some new connections at the site. So basically what we're going to do is we have a demonstration garden right now in Grand Center. It's a nice garden, but it's very lacking. And my two biggest pet peeves is the fact that it's not ADA accessible. It is bumpy, it is hilly, it's got ruts. We need a space that is fully accessible to everybody. And the other challenge is we have some schools come to our garden, but we don't actually promote it very much. Just for the mere fact, we don't have all the facilities around it. We have a porta potty at the site. So when kids need to go bathroom, it's kind of sad, like there's a porta potty to go to. So we actually want to build a very innovative space and show different types of gardening and different types of approaches, some that work and some that fail, but then also have it be fully accessible and a welcoming place for people to come to, and really promote it for both field trips and for visitors in urban ag too, to come visit. We do have chickens, our demonstration garden too. So we do definitely bring the chickens with us to this site, but then really have an outdoor classroom there too. We'll do the full composting approach. We'll have hopefully some solar pieces to it too. We'll have some water retention issues, how to harvest rainwater, and even bring in some natives in too to show how the pollinators work with the food. So we're excited to actually be able to get a blank slate and really build out a really nice demonstration garden as part of the project. And then we're looking at too, working with the Clayco, look at the landscaping, bringing in more natives. We want to put a garden bed along Delmar as part of the project, and look at all the rooftops. As you see from this drawing, there's lots of rooftops too. And we've already planned for our office to have access to one rooftop right out of our office to kind of test out different things. And one of the ideas is using blue roofs that hold a little bit of water before they actually fully drain. And then could we grow food with that? So there's a lot of ideas out there. And I think probably the one I'm most excited about is therapeutic horticulture. Because we'll be going into this project, we'll be the only green nonprofit there. But with all the other social services, rather than having your consultation service with somebody, your consulting session with somebody in a white box room, could we have a space on a rooftop or a demonstration garden in nature where you can go outside and meet with somebody and have that deep talk with them and have nature around you? Because we have seen already some therapy pieces done in nature where the people will open up a lot more. They'll share more, and it kind of takes the focus off actually what you're doing in terms of sitting face to face with somebody in a room and doing a therapy session. Could you be outside where you actually focus more on the plant? It's a game changer. And we've had a number of nonprofits excited about us coming in there and testing this theory out to see if we really can make a better connection with people to nature and to therapy in general. Because one thing we even heard during COVID, we have one lady that's been a long-time gardener in one of our land trust gardens. She told us, I just love weeding now. It's very instant satisfaction. It always needs to be done, but it's been very therapeutic for her during COVID just to get out there and just weed. Where before she kind of always kind of rumbled about it, but now she's like, it's actually been very important to me to get out there and just weed in my garden. and get that instant satisfaction, that positivity out of it, and just to get the fresh air and the nature part of it too. Environmental education, conservation, climate change, and eco-conscious living, incorporating your programs. Yes, definitely. Climate change is a big piece of it because we definitely discuss water issues too. And one thing I've not really touched on environmentally is the fact we promote with our gardens, you're improving the soil, you're improving the water, you're improving the air with these gardens, which is having a dramatic effect. I will say environmentally, there's been a challenge for us with the city of St. Louis especially, that we do only promote raised beds, just for the mere fact most of the sites in the city that are blank or vacant formerly had a house on them where they basically dumped the house into the hole. Therefore, all that paint that was on the house is now in the soil. And most of the soil in the city does test high for lead. So we do highly encourage all gardens in the city of St. Louis to actually do a raised bed, put a barrier down, and bring in fresh soil to actually grow in. We do not encourage any vegetable growing in the soil. If you're doing a fruit tree, we have seen, and nut trees too, that most of the contaminants do not reach the fruit. The tree will filter them out. So we do allow and encourage bushes and trees to be planted in the soil, but we do not actually encourage in the ground growing for vegetables in the city of St. Louis. And definitely with conservation, we definitely teach the kids the benefits of it, the reason behind it, especially with composting. People, as funny as it is, people love shoveling compost. Kids love shoveling it. So it's actually fun to actually teach them the different stages of, rather than throwing it away or putting it down at your disposal, bring it out here. Over time, it'll change and you can reuse it. And then it's black gold to add back to your soil. That's what you need right now for your garden to grow in the future. So those kind of things are definitely part of our education and what we want to try to teach the kids going forward as part of this effort, definitely.
Is there any way to rehabilitate the soil, dig it back up, or is it just long gone with the lead?
They're trying different growing. I can't remember. There's one new plant they're trying to grow. It's kind of like a cover crop. It's not working as well as they had hoped in terms of pulling out the contaminants. That's part of the challenge because I know we get asked a lot in the city of St. Louis with all the vacant land. Why don't you just grow more food? And you look at the soil and you're like, you got to dig down 3 feet, pull it all out, and put new soil in. That's what we're going to do at the demonstration garden. We're going to go in, because it probably was a block that had 2 houses on it. We're going to scrape it off and bring in new soil. It's just so hard to actually pull the contaminants out of the soil. And lead's just the most common. Depending on what was in the site before, you have other contaminants too, especially from concrete and some, something they used to spray on concrete or asphalt that's runoff now. That's really been poisoning a lot of the land we've realized in the city of St. Louis too. So people are trying different ways to try to pull it out, but a lot of it takes a number of years of growing a certain kind of crop to pull the contaminant out, and then just basically getting rid of whatever you grow. I know you can't use it for compost. I'm not sure what you do with it after you do harvest it to pull the contaminants out, but it takes so long. There's not a clear way to do this yet. So yeah, that is tough too, yeah. And then again, I'll say one thing to consider for a community garden we love is churches. Because most churches have been around for a long time and controlled their land for a long time, and it's relatively clean. So we do, in certain cases, I will say, I'll put a caveat, in the city of St. Louis, if church has been around a long time and it has control of the land for a long time, we can test it and make sure there is no contaminants in it, and then allow them to grow actually in the soil. But for the most part, especially on vacant lots, it is really tough. The soil is a major challenge. And we haven't gotten that far into it, but we actually see more contaminants in East St. Louis now too. The higher level of just the industry they had over there. There's just so much more in the soil over there too. It's like even, we have some worries that we may encourage some of the gardens to make sure they put down mulch around all their beds too, between the walking paths, just to keep down kids kind of playing in the soil when they're there. It's just, yeah. Yes. The history we have to live with and deal with now, it is a shame. All right, that's a sad note. Okay, I'll try to switch it up and be a little more positive here now. Looking at next year, I am so ready for 2021. 2020 has been a crazy year in so many different ways. And part of the challenge, I think, too, for a lot of nonprofits is to find the positives of what you can do during this time right now. So we do see more people connecting with nature. People are home more. People are definitely taking care of their lawns more. And we've seen definitely an increase in people wanting to grow their own food. Like I mentioned, maybe at the beginning of the call, I don't know if Michael heard or not, but our virtual classes are actually getting more attendees now than they did when we did them in person. I think we're seeing much more of an interest overall in learning how to grow food. And we're working on a new strategic plan right now. I think we'll have greater focus on getting that knowledge out to more people. And this summer, we did one kind of pilot project where we actually targeted backyard gardeners. We have not done that for the most part in our history of our organization. We've been very place-based, whether it be the community garden, school garden, urban orchard, or urban farm. It's been very place-based. And we've had a number of home gardeners and home growers come to our classes, come to our conference. So we decided this year just to test out, if we sell garden beds to people, will they buy them? We did our first phase, sold out during our staff meeting. We launched it at 9 o'clock and we had staff meeting at 9:30. By 10:30, it was already sold out. We did 3 phases of it, sold out every one of them. So we now have over 100 backyards that are part of our Gateway Greening network that we're trying to figure out now how to approach next year to give more people access. Because again, we've always kind of focused on the community space of coming to one location. But for backyard gardeners, and I'm a backyard gardener, we grow more food than we can eat. We give it away. And I'll say literally today, we gave away some green tomato salsa to our neighbor today. Those kind of things happen. Even with your backyard gardener, you are creating more community with your backyard garden. And part of our challenge too, we want to help figure out too in the city of St. Louis is the fact that there are, and in the county too, depending on where you live. I'm not sure. Kirkwood's actually pretty flexible on growing and having chickens in the municipality. But a lot of places don't allow growing vegetables in the front yard. A lot of places have challenges in terms of the height of how things can grow height-wise in the front yard. And working through some of those issues with some of these municipalities, a lot of people who might not have sun in their backyard, but could grow in their front yard. And try to figure out some ways to find some happy mediums with some municipalities to allow that, even in the city of St. Louis, to grow more food at different locations. And how can we approach people who live in apartments too? How can we help them with balcony gardens too? They won't grow nearly the quantity they would get in a community garden or in their backyard, but can they grow something, whether it be even just herbs on their porch? And can we help them do that? So part of our challenge over the next few months is to figure out how we want to approach that next year. I'll say with the third wave right now, we're kind of under with COVID, we need to find a way to serve people at home because we're going to be home to a large extent again in the spring. And we are, another silver lining, trying to look at the positives of all this, between cabin fever in general over winter. And then we're going to have COVID cabin fever because we're not getting out having fun, even at a minimal degree during the winter or even during the holidays. People are going to want to get outside. I'm more looking forward to that first nice day where it gets in like the 60s, and maybe late February or March, where everybody wants to get outside. And how can we capitalize upon that? When people do want to get outside, how can we help them enjoy the nature more and maybe grow food for themselves, whether it be at home, in a community garden or school garden, come the springtime. And we're hopeful we can get more people out into these projects in the near future too. Hopefully in the spring, things do get better and we can get volunteer groups out to some of these places too. So that's part of our exciting plan for next year. Again, we'll be moving to Delmar Divine hopefully by next fall, but then before then we'll start building our demonstration garden. And then part of our challenge too, as I kind of alluded to earlier with Gateway Green, is the fact that we don't have the word food in our name. We've really changed over the years to have more of a focus on food. And we need a new website, and we are going to look at a new image and possibly a new messaging for Gateway Greening going forward in the next year too. So a lot's happening. I'm really excited about it. In spite of all the challenges that we've had in 2020, 2021 could be a good year for Gateway Greening and for all people just trying to grow food, which I think is kind of exciting to think about. All right. Last slide. I'm right on time. Okay. Getting involved, just to give you a quick overview of how we've operated and then ways you can join in and how we've been impacted by COVID. A lot of our support comes from individual donors. Corporations are a large part of our funding stream too. We've definitely seen a reduction in that this year. I'll say most of our funding, we've kept all of our funders in place for the most part, but they have cut back. They are getting conservative in terms of how much they've given us as opposed to previous years. And we've had events canceled too. We had a couple fundraisers canceled just because they were focused on being together, being around people. And doing a Zoom fundraiser is a challenge. And we've toyed with the idea. We've actually participated on other ones, and it is tough. it is tough to make that connection through Zoom. So a lot of things we're not trying to do in terms of fundraising virtually is just really tough. And I'll say with the reduction in finances, we do have less staff. I'll say we've been lucky in terms of we've had no layoffs. We did have 2 people in our school program that voluntarily resigned, basically career changes for both of them. So it actually helped us out in a lot of ways financially, but also because we didn't have work for them this fall. With all the school closures and all the virtual teaching, we didn't have that much going on. So we have less staff overall through COVID, but it has kind of reset us to look ahead to next year and kind of ramp up for whatever demand we have in 2021. But then if you want to get more involved, I suggest you join a project. You can go to our website and you can actually click on the community projects, join a project. We encourage you, first of all, to join when it's already existing, because a lot of places do have openings. I will say with COVID, a lot of them did fill up this year and do have a waiting list. But look for projects that are around you first. And then if that's not what you want to do, definitely we take individual volunteers in normal years. And we take group volunteers in normal years too. We have severely backed that off right now. We'll reevaluate come January. But with the end of the growing season for us, we're not taking on new volunteers, or corporations are not reaching out to us for large groups too, which is tough, because those large group volunteer groups that come out do a lot of help for school gardens, especially in terms of either opening them up, sustaining them during the summertime, or closing them down at the end of the year. So it's been a struggle because a lot of these gardens have had to take on more themselves to keep them operating. Because we usually have like 2,000 or 3,000 volunteers come through us that go out to community gardens and school gardens. And then attend workshops. We have a conference coming up in February. Unfortunately, all that would be virtual now. We have a conference in February that usually brings in 200 people into one site. And part of that, the community you mentioned earlier about the extra benefits is it's one time a year where other gardens come together and they share their problems. I remember one time I was in a meeting and they were discussing rats in their garden and how they deal with it, how they deal with rodents in their garden, how they deal with birds coming in, those kind of things, making those connections of a garden from North City to South City. And they all have a commonality of they're all trying to grow food, and what challenges do you have? So it's gonna be tough this year. We're gonna do it virtually. It won't be one day virtual. I think we're gonna take it over one full week in February. So we'll provide the education, which is great, but it's so hard to lose that in-person connection of the meeting before the meeting, person you haven't seen for a full year. How's the family going? You're losing that chit chat piece of it and those real true community connections by being virtual. So as soon as we can figure out a way to get people back together again, we'll do it. But for right now, we are virtual for the foreseeable future. Attend events too. We have different events in terms of both workshops and classes and just tours. Again, they'll be virtual for right now. So right now it is follow us on social media, sign up for our newsletter, and also donate money, because it's going to be a struggle, not just for us. And I would encourage you to consider all the nonprofits you support, giving them a little bit extra this year, because we're all going to be struggling. It's all going to be a challenge for all of us to figure out how to navigate COVID and figure out what we want to try and do for the next year, because it's tough right now. We're trying to plan our budget for next year. Is what's going to happen? Will funders want to fund new projects? Will the community be out there wanting to take on new community gardens or school gardens or a backyard program? What is the appetite? And we don't know, because part of it's just the fear that is out there with COVID is what can and can't do. And there is no end date yet. So I'll end with that. Support your local nonprofits, whether it be Gateway Greening or somebody else. I'm sure they would welcome any support right now. So that's my pitch. Is Gateway Greening involved with any universities in the St. Louis area? Yes, we do actually have a really good partnership with St. Louis University. They actually have a farm on site at the university. The food from the farm goes into one of their cafeterias there. So that definitely is one great connection that we have with them. And then with the Del Mar Divine, Wash U is a large part of it. So we definitely have a connection with Wash U in terms of resources. And then from Eco-Critical Philosophical Department, wonder has there been any engagement in that demographic? Could you explain more what you mean by Eco-Critical Philosophy Department?
Giving you a very complex question.
Yes, I'm not sure where to go with that. You can type it, or you want to unmute yourself too. But definitely for us, the university has been a bigger piece, because you do have Harris-Stowe State University does have a urban agriculture program. They've been trying to get going. It's been around now for a few years. We've had a few of them come and volunteer and work through some of our projects to learn more about what's going on in St. Louis. And there have been some other efforts in terms of universities wanting to take on some extra land to grow food, have not been as successful as they want them to be. And I'll say too, there's a bigger interest right now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next few months, because there's supposed to be an announcement regarding some indoor growing facilities. People ask us, do we do like indoor growing at all? And honestly, we don't. Part of our approach is a community connection, and that the fact that a lot of indoor growing is very isolated and very controlled and doesn't really bring in the community as a whole. My old school sees a lot of interaction with conservation and environmental science. I'm just curious if there have been any departments or ways to connect some universities to you all. No, honestly, right now we're trying to work with back to you're actually really back to your first question about the impact of gateway greening. We want to figure out, and we need a third-party source to kind of tell us, is what is our overall impact? How much impact are we having in a community with the food we grow? Because we've had some challenges of trying to gauge what is the overall impact, especially with kids too, because we know we watch kids grow the food, and the food that they grow, they're going to eat. It'd be food they never would have tried individually, but when they grow it themselves, they will eat it. But what is the overall impact? Are they taking that knowledge and that craving for, say, a radish home to their family, and is it making a change? And we've had a challenge because we ask them, like, do you eat more green food at home? Trying to make it as simple as possible. And then we find out they had green jelly bellies as part of the food. And I was like, well, that's not what we wanted. So we're actually working with SIUE right now to see if they can actually come in and do at least look at the impact on the community itself in terms of numbers we can get. Primarily it'd be crime statistics around a garden and property values. Because we actually had a realtor come and testify for us one time, actually regarding the land trust gardens, to say that when she sells a home with a community garden nearby, she uses it as an asset, as something she uses to sell the neighborhood, to sell that home as being a positive. But how can we actually judge that in terms of quantifying the impact of a community garden? Again, it's not the sole reason a community is going to be coming up and doing well, but can we use a university and some of the research tools to really kind of figure out what is that impact? And then two, one thing we need to look at with conservation and environmental science is we have some rough numbers, but like we can show how much water we think we have actually pulled out of the sewer system, especially in the city of St. Louis, where it's a dual sewer. And then when it floods bad, it goes into all the wastewater too. So how much water we pulled out of the system to really kind of show what is actually happening in terms of all this extra land that we've created and brought into growing space to keep water out of the system, where previously they had some clay soil that just had the water running off into the sewer system. So we're trying to quantify that. And another thing too is, I think with environmental science is soil temperatures. We're learning more and more about soil temperature, and then I've learned a lot more, and how important it is for a certain soil temperature to be at to do certain things, and actually to then track climate change. Because again, we're seeing, at least our early numbers in a few sites we have in St. Louis, we need to add some more in terms of they actually measure the temperature of the soil. And it's getting higher and higher. And it's getting higher and higher, longer and longer throughout the growing season. So we're definitely trying to find ways to connect to more universities. It's primarily been SLU and WashU in this new relationship now with SIUE, to try to quantify some of what we're doing, to really kind of use their resource on the research side to kind of validate what we think is happening, but really kind of show with numbers then what is our overall impact. So yes, we're trying to find that and get more students into. We do have a number of interns come from Fonbon in our dietetics program, because one thing we do not do is we do not teach how to cook. So they've come in and taken the garden harvest and then show people how to grow how to use the food and cook it into something they actually might eat going forward, especially with some of the stranger vegetables that are out there. We got to show people how to actually grow, how to actually use it in the kitchen to make it actually palatable for everybody to enjoy too. So different ways with universities. All right, Mariah, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I had one last question before wrapping up.
Sure.
Do you guys work with local farmers at all? I know it's harder, at least in St. Louis, but I remember years ago I went to it was in Kentucky. A local farmer was talking about the issues of how farming is dying out as just a thing that people do and not just factory farms. And I was wondering if you guys had any interactions or worked with local farmers.
We do, and even for our Chefs on the Garden event that we do for our gala, we bring in harvesting some extra food from local gardeners, local farmers. And part of our goal too, it would be great, is a long-term plan, is the fact that can we get some of our school gardens, some of those students to get hooked on agriculture? They go through, hopefully, we're trying to work on this, the full K through 12 programming with schools having gardens. Some schools have it actually already. And then could they follow a career in agriculture? Could they actually maybe join a community garden when they get out of school? And then maybe follow that into one of our urban farms that are local, that you're not getting into a tractor yet, but you are growing in a larger quantity. And then I would love to see somebody make that full cycle and then go to primarily Illinois, because probably we're actually closer to buy a farm, and make that full connection to the farm. Because we are seeing a struggle with farmers out there right now in terms of their families are not continuing the profession. Kids are not wanting to stay on the farm in the future. But if we can build up some of our connections with our students to get them interested in growing food, I do think we're seeing a movement overall to more local food. I think with restaurants, especially, you're seeing more restaurants have their own garden too, which is pretty impressive. Where the chef wants to grow certain things because he knows or she knows that they want that in their food. So definitely connection. I would love to have a way where we actually have a program to show people what an urban farm is and take them out to a real farm and really see what it's like with a tractor and all the other larger quantities of produce.
Well, that's awesome. I got the sense that Michael didn't have any other questions.
Yes.
But
Well,
thank you.
Michael,
That was,
for joining.
yeah, that was a great presentation. I learned a lot. I did not know that climate change had a positive, even though it shouldn't be a positive.
Exactly.
But
Yeah. Yep. Good.
well, thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Michael.
Bye.
Have a good night.